Hello and welcome to Nanapod, a podcast dedicated to the fantastic manga written by Yasu. I'm Crystal, and I'm joined by my best girl Kirsten as we dissect this manga, discussing everything from the emotions, the cultural impact, as well as any headcanons that might be floating around in our brains. With this podcast, we hope to preserve a shoujo staple that sadly hasn't been talked about in a very long time. So come with us. We're waiting for you in apartment 707. Hello everyone, and welcome to Nanapod. And we are on chapter 57 here. And it opens with our narration saying the condo that Ren and Nana moved into together was one station from our place, 10 minutes by car, and like Takumi said, really close. It is close, but it's a separate neighborhood, just like the distance I felt between me and Nana. And let's see. I think he's the manager? He's one of the managers. Anyway, we have room 601, and it says housing these days is actually more inconvenient because places have too much closet space or are designed to be user-friendly. The more convenient things become, the fewer ways there are to use them. Isn't that so true? Man, it's worse now. Anyway, but this place has been renovated into a studio, one room that's 200 square meters. There's no limit to what you can do with this place. Well, what do you think? Gaia was moving slow, so I went and found this place. Masato, faux Masato, says, it's perfect. Lovebirds don't need separate rooms anyway, heart. Nana says, as long as it's livable, I don't care. Thanks. And then there's a little sign, a little note here pointing to Masato's hair that says, hair extensions. And both, Ren and his assistant are looking over at her like, what? And the fancy not Naoki is like, got the dots. And the assistant says, Mr. Hanjo, we really have to get going now. And then the other guy, he says, sorry to fancy non-Naoki. And the guy's like, what the hell? We just got here and you're taking off? Check the place out. And then Ren's like, sorry, Nana, I have to split. Oh, that might actually be Ren's manager. I think it is. Anyway, she looks at him and she's like, what are you apologizing for? Go work and make money like a real man. And he just looks at her like, okay. You know, like, he's giving her very much like a, okay, I know you're like joking, but I hope you're actually okay because you had a panic attack the other night. And we have a scene change here, and it's Rira and her assistant. And Ren is having that thought of, I don't want you to write songs for anyone else but me. And then Ren's assistant is like, good morning. And then, you know, our female assistant is like, good morning. And Rira says, hey, Ren, I wrote lyrics to the demo you gave me yesterday. And then the male assistant is like, what? You already wrote the song? That was fast. And Rira says, but the chorus part is fast and all in English. People probably won't be able to tell what I'm singing. What do you think? And Ren glances at it. And he looks at Rira with a little blush lines and he says, it might be too many words, and I can't tell how it goes with the melody. So Rira just starts singing in, you know, the middle of the hall to kind of show him. And she goes, it goes like that. What do you think? And the male assistant has all the sparkles and blush lines. And he's like, wow, that's amazing. One single should have at least some Japanese in it, says Ren. But I think it's good. And she's like, thanks, heart. I got 3 votes. And the female assistant says, looks like we can go record with no problem. And the male assistant says, Yeah, but when Nana finally comes back from tour, then you go to London. Now you have a new place together, but you can't be together at all. And Ren isn't saying anything to that. He's clearly just thinking the same thing, probably. And then we have the think boxes that says, at the end of this month, Takumi's going to London for 2 months to record their new album. The studio time was booked a year ago, so there's no way I can complain. And now we have a calendar here for November 2001, and there's all the stuff on it here. So the Tuesday before on October is like Italian film retrospective, 11/13 through 12/27, and then there's like a little note, and it's like 1/8 through 2/27, and then on the first, Shin and Rira's birthday. On the second, cleaning day. Saturday, Blast goes on tour. Akazuka, mom and dad come to Tokyo on the third here. And then there's Shibuya with Nami. And then on the 6th, it's checkout cooking class. On the 7th is Eat with June at Daikanyama. On the 9th, it says regular checkup. And on the 10th, it had wedding with a heart, but it was crossed out and it says delayed. And then on the 11th, it says winterize apartment with a little snowman. And on the 12th, there's like 707, meet Masato at Jackson. On the 13th, marriage license, cooking class. On the 14th, fire alarm check at 10 a.m. On the 15th, photo shoot at 6 a.m. On the 16th, sales starts shopping! Exclamation point. On the 17th, movie Amelie. On the 18th, there's a little heart with Nana in it, and that says Blast is back. At 19, on the 19th, it's Shin at 2 p.m. On the 20th, there's a cooking class. On the 22nd, search hits stands. On the 23rd, that's just, Thanksgiving and stuff, Labor Day, all that. The 24th, regular checkup. The 27th is a cooking class. The 28th, London, Takumi is recording. And then the 30th, down here, my birthday. And then on the 12/1, it says Harry Potter opening night. I don't remember which movie that was for, but anyway. Hachi's looking at the Takumi is recording. He's going right through her birthday. And she's like, Demon Lord, we won't be together on my birthday, Christmas, or New Year's. And then there's a ding dong. And it's Shin. And he is drinking his tea. And he's like, yum, heart. And she's like, glad you like it, heart. Eat as much as you want. You're a growing boy. And he says, is it all right for me to be here? Won't your hubby get mad? And she says, no, it's fine. Heart, Takumi said I can have you over anytime. Here's some rice with oysters. And he's like, really? And she says, really, or else I wouldn't have married him. And Shin's like, I'm happy when mommy's happy. Heart, and I'm like, it's cute. I'll never, ever, ever stop thinking it's cute. Anyway, she's like, and you can call Takumi daddy too, Heart. And then I think it's Shin changing the subject. He's like, I want to have my own family. And then Hachi's got the dots. And now there is a scene change. And it says, we're having the couch and wardrobe delivered tomorrow, but if the curtains are going to take a week, you can't move in till then. And then I think it's this guy who's driving. I don't know this guy. We'll probably get a name here soon. And Nana says, we don't need curtains, right? And Masato says, well, you're on the 6th floor, but you never know who might be peeping. And then this guy who's driving the car with a room, his name is Osamu Hikada, 22, personal driver for Shikai Corporation. And he's like, where to next? And Nana says, is there a cute pet shop around here? Masato says, a pet shop. And she says, it's Hachiko's birthday next week. And Masato goes, really? And Nana's got the blushes. And she's like, I have to get her some cute collar or sweater. Heart. Pink would be cool. She's got like the blush lines, and also she's wearing glasses like Yasu right now. But anyway, Misato's like, don't buy the ones for dogs. And now there's a scene change with the clack 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 of the mahjong, and here's Genpai, and he's like, no way you guys are still playing. You should get some R&R on your day off. You'll get sick. And they all glare at him, and this is it's Nobu and Yuri and Yasu and Miyu. And Nobu's like, then can we go out instead? And he says no. And Yuri says, we'll be fine. We'll go in disguise. I want to go to an amusement park. And Miyu says, me too, heart. And Yasu says, I can't. My wig will fly off. Because he's got an afro when he's in disguise, and there's like this shot of them like in a roller coaster, and it's going down with a whoosh, and the afro is flying off of his head. And Genpai's like, what the hell? And Yuri and Nobu are cracking up, and he's like, why would you two go together? That's not funny. And Yasu says, oh, we're going out. Yep. And then they're all looking over at him like, oh. But of course, you know, Genpai has like this, no, not my Yasu look. And Nobu's like, what? With the blush lines. And then now everybody's freaking out. And Nobu's like, what the? Really? And then there's a gasp. And Genpai's got the face. And Yuri says, did you sleep with him? How was it? In my fantasy, Yasu's penis has pearls in it. Why would you say that? Oh my god. And Miyu is just a silence and a little sign next to her. And then Genpai runs over and he starts choking Yasu, and he's like, what the hell? Why would you go out with her when you got me? I'll kill you, arg. And Yasu says, so anyway, why do you care? It's our day off. And Nobu says, I really don't get you, Yasu, man of mystery. And Genpai says, I found you a venue for the thank you party. You used me for that, and that's all you've got to say? And Yasu's like, oh, thank you. I thought we wouldn't find a place for Christmas Eve. Thanks, Jen. And now, you know, he's blushing, and he's got like a... And then Miyu was like, but it's during the day. I'm sure you can find something somewhere. And Genpai, like, has his arm around Yasu with, like, his hand, like, halfway into Yasu's robe. And he's like, shut up. I'm not going to lose to a slacker like you. And Yasu's got all the dots. And Yuri is getting a nosebleeds because she's like, oh no, my nose is bleeding, because she's having wild fantasies. She's thinking about them banging. Or she's thinking about Yasu having pearls in his penis. I don't understand. Anyway, Nobu's like, so what's the venue? And Genpai says, Blood in Harajuku. It's a small club, but great for parties, heart. And Nobu's got a sweat bead, and he's like, club? And Yuri's in, he's like a live music club? And Yasu says, of course. Why would we invite our fans and not play a show? And Nobu gets the blushes, and he's like, yay, a show, yeah! And then Yuri's like, eek, I can't wait! And Genpai's like, you can't come. And then back at Zero In, because we did leave our bebes here. We have real Masato. She's like, what? And her friend, is it Fuji? I can't remember at the moment. Anyway, she's like, a Christmas party with Blast? And then one of the head groupies is like, "Keep your voice down." She bangs her hand on the table. And then our punk bouncer is like, "You're louder than them." And then Clara, that's her name. She's Clara. She's 18. Kansai branch leader, Blast fan club. And she's like, "Don't tell anyone about this. Only 30 people are being invited." And the girls are like, 30? And Claire's like, 10 locals who were already fans before Blast signed. And the other 20 will be picked from all over the country. 3 from Kansai. So me and 2 more people. And the girls just look at each other with blushes. And then Claire says, "Yesterday's meeting was an interview for that, and you guys passed. Congratulations." And the girls are just tears. And they're like, oh, they gasp. And Real Masato is thinking about clinking cocktail glasses with Nana. And her friend is thinking about dancing with Shin. And it's very cute. And now we have a scene change back to Hachi and Takumi's apartment. And she's saying, "Shin, about the Christmas party, I'm not going." And he says, "But Hachi, you were our first Tokyo fan. If you don't come, Nobu will be bummed." And she says, "Yeah, but I'm sorry. I shouldn't see Nobu when Takumi's not around." And Shin gets like a tick mark and he looks over her like, "Huh?" And she's like, "I'm sorry. I doubt Takumi would say I can't go, but he wouldn't be happy." And he's like, "I get it. Then you better have something else to do that night before Nana asks you, so you'll have a real excuse." And she looks at him like, "Oh," and then is like, "Right." And then she falls down on her little pillows, and she's like, "I can't compete with you, Shin. I was going to lecture you today, but you're more mature than me, so I can't." And he says, "About what?" And she says, he says, "I'm fine. I'm happy, heart." And he's like sparkling now. And she's looking up at him like, "Really?" And he's like, "Well, what is it? Just say it, heart." And he's like moved all the way over to where she is. And he's trying to just roll his charisma here. And she's like, "Well, it's kind of too late to say this, but I think you should stop prostituting yourself to women." And he's like, "Oh, I'm not doing that anymore." And then she looks up and she's like, "But yesterday you sounded like you have lots of customers. You even made out with Ren. I'm jealous." And then he's looking at her like, "That was just a joke. I have enough money now to make ends meet. And now people recognize my face, so I can't do that anymore anyway. I'm not stupid." And she's looking at him with dots like, "Oh." And he's looking at her with blush lines, almost in like a, please believe me. And then she's thinking, yeah, Shin isn't stupid. And then she says, "But," and he said, "I'm for reals, Mommy. Heart, trust me. I don't want anything Mommy doesn't approve of." And then she's thinking, but when he got back from tour, he ran off to Rira's. And then she looks at him and she's like, "Shin, are you really in love with Rira?" And he, shock, big eyes. I mean, he knows that she is very much in her head all the time, so I think he might be surprised that she noticed. And then he's thinking about Takumi and what he said, and it says, "If you really love her, you can start over then." And he hasn't said anything, and he looks away, and he's thinking about the last time they saw each other, and she said, "We'll be able to see each other again at some point." And then thinking about the first night that they met. Even though over it, it's like, it's better if we pretend nothing ever happened, which is what he said. And then thinking about the time that they were doing it inside the tour bus, and they were talking about the red thread, and he said, "And you still don't believe in fate?" And she said, "The red thread? I totally believe in it now." And he starts to cry. And she just reaches out and just holds his hand and thinks about her question, "Are you really in love with Rira?" And he says, "I don't know." But he isn't looking at her, he's looking down. And he says, "I can't say for sure I'll go back to her in the future. Does that mean that I don't love her?" And she squeezes his hand because now like the tears are falling on her hand, and she says, "No, it doesn't." And now she's thinking, don't grow up to be someone who's just lonely and never takes a risk for love. And that's so sad. That's so sad. I'm so glad he has Hachi right now, though, because it's hard, you know. He thought he'd have to say goodbye to her forever, and now he's so conflicted. And he's admitting that he's conflicted, and that's good. For once, he doesn't have to mother somebody else. Like, Hachi's allowed. But he also allowed her. So, that's why their relationship is so great. Anyway, scene change, and Ren is looking out into the night sky at the moon, and there's a room, and Takumi looks over, I think who's he looking at? I don't know. He's looking over. Oh, he's looking at Rira's hand. It looks like, and she just has like a small ring on her pinky finger, but nothing else. And then there's a room, and there's a ... and he's like, the lyrics are great. And Naoki's like, yeah, totally, heart. And Rira says, you really think so? And he says, the chorus is good like this. Kudos. And she smiles. And then Naoki's like, but I can't believe you wrote a song in one night. What happened? And she looks up at him, and Takumi flicks the lighter. And Rira says, I was a good girl, and the music god came to me. Maybe it was watching over me. And Takumi looks over at her. And then Naoki's like, oh, then maybe I should try to be good too. Seriously. And Ren has like kind of looked over and is giving like a smile, but then he looks back out the window. And he's thinking, I gave up everything that was important to me, moved to Tokyo, and bet my life on Trap Nest. We have to keep our eyes on the prize. And now we have a scene change again. And it's Nana, and she says, hey, hubby, welcome home, heart. And he smiles. And he's like, what you doing, hun, heart, work? And she says, I'm trying to fill out this marriage form, but I don't really get it. What does other adoptive parents mean? And it's here on the form, and it's like parents' names, relationship with parents, other adoptive parents, list from others section. And Ren looks at it, and he's an orphan, so he's looking at it, he's like, so no. And she's like, I know, right? It doesn't make sense. There are other adoptive parents? And he's like, but you don't have any adoptive parents, right? Just your grandma? And she said, well, when I looked at the family register, turns out I was officially adopted by grandma 6 months after she took me in. And he's like, what? And he looks at it here, and it's like mother, like the father is blank, and then mother it says Misuzu Osaki. And then it says adopted father blank, and then the adopted mother is Miyuki Osaki, of Nana. And he's like, you didn't know? And she said, well, I kind of had an idea, but I wanted her to tell me to my face. Damn that old lady. And then there's more notes at the bottom that says, born March 5th, 1981, Meguro Ward, Tokyo. Adopted by Miyuki Osaki, January 5th, 1985. Yutenji Cho, 7-2, Meguro-ku, Tokyo. And he's just looking at it. He's got like all these swirlies in the background and just reading all the stuff with the dots. And he's like, I don't get it. Were you born in Tokyo and in Meguro? So now you're back in Tokyo? It's creepy. And she said, how should I know? I don't remember anything. My mind's blank. And he's like, but you remember when you moved to your grandma's place when you were 4? And she says, well, vaguely. It was in the springtime when I was 4. I overheard my grandma telling one of her regular customers. I wonder how Jen's doing. When grandma was in critical condition, he stayed with her. Her real daughter didn't even go to the funeral. And now he's looking back down to the paperwork, and then like there's the Misuzu, and like it's crossed out, and it says that her birth date is September 17th, 1960. And then he's got the dots, and he's like, your mom was born in Tokyo too? And Nana's in bed now, and she's like, Grandpa was working in Tokyo, but he died, and she came back with her daughter. He says, oh, okay. But this doesn't tell us where Misuzu is now. Is she alive? And I think it's Nana's like, it was a long time ago when she was in Meguro, and she might not have been living at her legal residence. And she's like, I don't care. And she has her back turned to Ren. And now we're having this memory happen where Yasu was like, I saw it happen when Hachi split. She's so damaged from her mother abandoning her. And he's remembering the time that she put her phone in the sink. And she doesn't remember putting her phone in the sink. And that was a while ago. And then Nana sits up and she's like, all I want to know is, do I write my grandma's name where it says parents' names? Or do I write my real mother's name and write my grandma's name where it says others? And do I put her name down even if she's dead? And then they look at the paperwork and Ren's like, I don't know. Ask the ward officer Baldy about technicalities like that. Don't ask me. And she's like, damn it. Why is it have to be so confusing? It sucks. And he says, should we just pretend we filed it instead? I don't want, and I doubt anyone would find out. And she's got like the big vacant eyes and he's got the dots like, oh shit. And then he's like, I didn't mean, honestly, being officially married doesn't mean that much to me. As long as we're together, that's what I want. And she just stares up at him and he says, but Nana, you had no intention of getting back together with me. And even when I forced the point, you said your pride keeps you from living with me. And her eyes are vacant again. And she's remembering when she was in the bathtub when they got back together and said, someday when I'm old, when my pride and vanity fade and I get sick of singing, can I retire to that place with you? And he says, but I didn't think about how you felt. Well, I tried not to think about it and pressured you with my own agenda. And she's remembering Nobu saying, Nana, is your pride that important? You're the one who's only thinking about yourself. And Ren says, but I promise to consider your feelings from now on. I really can't quit Trap Nest now, and I have no intention of quitting. So I want you to tell me what you want to do concerning that. And her eyes are vacant again, and he looks over at her, and she sits up once more because she had flopped back down, and she says, I'm sorry. I don't understand what I'm doing myself. And he pauses, then he says, then think about it. If you want to be alone, I'll check into another room. If you don't, I'll stay right here. And her eyes are vacant. And he looks over at her and she says, I want to be with you. And then he hugs her really close. And now it's Hachi, and she's on the phone with Takumi, and he's saying, I'm amazed. What did you tell Shin? And she says, huh? And he said, Shin went to the hotel yesterday, but you didn't let him go into Rira's room? Are you his mom? Heart? And I think he might have woken her up from a nap, and she's like, no, I tried to stop him, but he went anyway. And Takumi's like, huh? And he's like, what the hell? You made it seem like you were all in control. You're all talk. And she says, I invited Shin over to give him the beatdown. Oh, man. But then he told me he and Rira broke up yesterday. And Takumi stops. And he says, liar. And she's like, I'm not lying. And he says, but Rira's still wearing her ring. Oh, red string of fate ring. Got it. And Hachi's like, her ring? And he says, she never wears rings, but she's been wearing one on her pinky since the day after her birthday. Shin probably gave it to her. And Hachi stops and she's like, then Rira must be in love with Shin too. And Takumi says, and it's a ruby. But why? It's not her birthstone, and red's not her color. And he's like, A topaz would be more like it. And Hachi's thinking, and she has seen Shin wearing another one on his pinky. And she's like, oh, Shin's been wearing a ruby on his pinky too. On his left hand? And Takumi stops and he's like, what? Like the same ring? This isn't good. And she says, it's silver, maybe platinum? It's a big rectangular stone. So it must be real and expensive. And he's like, oh, then the shape is totally different. He's got some self-respect. But Shin doesn't seem like a ruby guy either. He should go blue topaz. I'm so nice you have an opinion about the rings they're wearing, Takumi. And she's like, but Takumi, Shin and Rira are really in love with each other. Why do they have to break up? It's awful. Can't you do something about it? And he says, well, do you think they really broke up? I don't think you can see through Shin's lies. And she says, it's true. Shin was totally crying. And he goes, what? He was crying? But Rira seemed just fine. She was more upbeat than usual. And Hachi says, that's 'cause Rira dumped him to concentrate on her work. She has to be upbeat. God, you idiot! Why don't you get it? Thank you, Hachi. Sometimes he doesn't understand. And Takumi stops, and he goes, what? Rira broke up with him? Why? She broke it off? And Hachi says, Rira said they should stop seeing each other because she's dedicated to being Trap Nest's front person first and foremost. And Takumi, his eyes get kind of wide, and Hachi says, which I can sort of see, but what's wrong with two people being together if they're in love? It's a miracle that Shin actually fell in love with someone. But now, guilt and crushed dreams are all that's left. I feel like I need to do something. I think at the very least Shin and Rira need to see each other before she goes off to London. And Takumi's thinking about her saying, I was a good girl, and the music god came to me. Maybe it was watching over me. And then he smiles. And she's like, you have to do something, Takumi. And then the think boxes are like, Takumi consoled me, but said there's nothing he could do. I knew there was nothing I could do. They're constantly in the spotlight. It'd be impossible for them to keep seeing each other without being found out. And I'm sure that if the media got onto it, Shin would get hurt even more. It's so cruel. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of the fans were like, well, they can't be together because it's illegal. And it's like, it's legal in Japan, doesn't make it right, but if they wait a while, it will be fine. But anyway, at the Excel Shirokani, it's June, and there's a bunch of people here, and there's a blah, 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 blah. And June, who we haven't seen in a while, looks really pissed. And she's, like, pushing people out of her way, and she's like, excuse me, get out of the way, get lost. Your stakeout is screwing with the residents here. And this reporter man is like, do you live here? Oh, can I talk to you? And June says, no, I'm just the door-to-door sales lady. And then there's this plop, and Hachi's like, yay, heart, tons of fresh veggies, thanks, June. What should I make? And she's like rubbing them on her cheeks, and they go squeak, squeak. And June says, just like I thought, reporters are swarming the joint. I figured you wouldn't even be able to get groceries. And Hachi's like, how many are there? And June says, maybe 30? And Hachi's like, that many? That's more than I thought. And then June is like, did you actually read the article? And then Hachi's like, yeah. And then she's like, then what's this? And she's showing her the Search magazine, and it says, Trapnest Takumi secretly weds Nana's best friend and ex-roommate, Mrs. N, 20, and 5 months pregnant. And Hachi she takes it, and she's got blushes, and she's like, best friend? Heart? What a sweet headline, no matter how many times I look at it, Heart. It's a great takeaway, Hachi. But June's like, you idiot! This only means double trouble. Why is Takumi talking about your relationship with the guru? And Hachi turns away and she's like, he talked because Search found out. It's better than just letting them write whatever they want. It took the edge off. It sounds all right. And June's like, how can you be so laid back about it? There's a photo of you in this magazine. Now you can't go anywhere. Even with your eyes blacked out, the paparazzi will find you out. And Hachi's like, but don't I look thinner in those photos? Heart, I'm psyched. And June looks at her with the dots and she's like, tosses the magazine and she's like, you better go hide out at your parents' while Takumi's in London. And Hachi says, no, I want to have my own family. I'm just going to keep on living how I've been living. I'll go to the grocery store, take my cooking class, and on my way home from my regular checkup, I'll have lunch at Jackson and clean up at apartment 707. And there's lots of movies I want to see. And June looks over her with like this, really? And then Hachi's getting kind of mad and she's like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why do I have to run from them? And then June gives her this smile like, atta girl, that's the backbone I've been waiting for you to have. Which, you know what? Good. And then there's the think boxes and they say, hey Nana, if people found out where you are now, I'm sure you'd get hurt all over again. So I won't look for you anymore. Which we all know that that's a lie. That's a lie. And that's a picture here of Nana's real mother reading the Search article. And now we are flashing forward, fam. We are going all the way to the future. And here's our sweet baby. And she's like, welcome home, mommy heart, she says to all grown up Hachiko. And she's down and she squeezes and she says, I'm home, heart squeeze, eek, eek. And then she's like, mommy, we have a big surprise for you today. Yep. And she's like, Satsuki, where'd you get these clothes? Hey, they're cute, but... And then there's a welcome home. And then Satsuki is like, hey! Because she's turned around and it is full-grown Takumi here with his haircut. Oh, it depresses me so much. Takumi, why did you cut your hair? I don't like it. Anyway. Satsuki's like, hey, no fair, daddy. I was gonna surprise mummy. You ruined it. And he says, oh, I'm sorry. And Hachi just has this real gentle look as he just picks his daughter up in his arms. And Hachi's thinking, I will wait forever for the day you get up on your feet again. And that's the end of the chapter, guys. Thank you so much for joining me for this one. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Hello. If you are interested in supporting me monetarily, I do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, both linked here at my About page here on YouTube. Go ahead and check those out, guys. I have a free tier and a one-time donation tip thing on my Ko-fi, and it's all there. You'll check it out. You'll see. Anyway, I will see you all in the next one. Good night.